Welcome to the Knowledge of Self Academy, our YouTube channel where we embark on an enlightening journey through the world of Pavlov's classical conditioning. We're here to explore the fascinating connections between our learned responses and the release of those delightful pleasure-inducing hormones. As we navigate this intriguing terrain, we'll uncover why we're naturally drawn to certain things and tend to steer clear of others. These inclinations are deeply woven into our minds, influenced by various mediums such as entertainment, literature, media, guidance, friendships, religious teachings, education, and our community. These influences are all part of an intricate indoctrination system designed to maintain our mental captivity. Inspired by Pavlov's renowned dog experiments, we'll delve deep into our cognitive framework, examining how we're conditioned to find pleasure in specific activities, closely linked to hormonal releases. It's essential to grasp that these so-called enjoyable activities often stem from values ingrained in our consciousness through various channels. Our comprehensive exploration will take you on a profound journey, guided by Pavlov's classical conditioning experiments. Together, we'll unravel the complex web of influences, from media to education and social interactions, molding our responses and preferences. These influences lead us to automatic reactions and an insatiable pursuit of pleasure. We'll also unveil the pivotal role of hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, and noradrenaline in conditions such as depression and anxiety. But we're not just here to educate, we're here to engage with you. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an insightful episode. And please, share our content with others who might find it equally eye-opening. Join us on this journey to uncover the intricate process of human conditioning and its profound and lasting impact on our mental landscape. Together, we'll explore the depths of our minds, peeling back the layers of conditioned responses, and gaining a deeper understanding of the world around us. Thank you for joining the Knowledge of Self Academy. Let's embark on this enlightening expedition together.
Summary: Unraveling the nexus of indoctrination, pleasure hormones, and automatic responses through Pavlovian insight. Exploring the depths of Pavlov's classical conditioning, we uncover the intricate threads tying it to our conditioned responses, igniting the release of pleasure-inducing hormones. It reveals our inclination towards specific stimuli while shying away from others, woven into our consciousness through mediums like entertainment, literature, media, guidance, friendships, religious teachings, education, and our community. All these threads are deeply rooted in the indoctrination system designed to keep us in mental bondage. Inspired by Pavlov's canine experiments, we plunge into the depths of our cognitive framework, scrutinizing our conditioning to derive pleasure from specific activities, intimately linked to hormone release. It's crucial to discern that these pleasurable activities often stem from conditioned values etched into our consciousness through various mediums. This all-encompassing exploration dives into the profound impact of indoctrination and conditioning on our lives, guided by Pavlov's classical conditioning experiments with dogs. It accentuates the intricate web of influences, entailing media, education, and social interactions, shaping our responses and preferences, leading to automatic reactions and an insatiable pursuit of pleasure. The narrative transcends by unveiling the pivotal role of hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, and noradrenaline in psychological conditions such as depression and anxiety. We warmly invite readers to embark on a journey, unraveling the intricate process of human conditioning and its enduring mark on our mental landscape. Within this narrative, the concept of orchestrated indoctrination surfaces as a masterful conditioning mechanism, intricately weaving a tapestry of illusory reality within individuals' minds. This surreal construct becomes deeply ingrained, propelling individuals to make choices devoid of conscious contemplation, akin to Pavlov's dog's instinctual salivation at the mere sound of a bell. These conditioned responses remain steadfast, eclipsing rational analysis and nurturing conformity, even when confronted with inconsistencies and challenges. The narrative adeptly contrasts the enduring nature of automatic emotional responses with individuals' unwavering commitment to indoctrinated beliefs and worldviews. This unswerving allegiance manifests in apparent contradictions within religious convictions, political affiliations, and notions of human equality, where ingrained emotional responses obscure rational scrutiny. Drawing parallels between physical confinement and mental indoctrination, the narrative exposes the entrenchment of desires for material wealth within the psyche. These desires act as a formidable driving force, motivating individuals to traverse paths promising satiation, sometimes at the expense of their integrity and values. Additionally, the narrative explores the influence of meticulously crafted indoctrination on the acquisition of basic necessities and the molding of one's character during formative years. It vividly illustrates how societal norms dictate the routes individuals must traverse to fulfill their fundamental needs. Pavlov's groundbreaking experiment serves as a potent metaphor, illuminating the automatic submission of human minds to indoctrinated worldviews, serving as a poignant symbol of mental subjugation. The narrative intricately dissects the interplay between indoctrination, emotional conditioning, and voluntary submission, underscoring the multifaceted nature of human behavior and the profound influence of well-structured ideologies on human autonomy. Furthermore, the narrative delves into the intricate dynamics of desire, power, and control, elucidating how conditioned desires foster a power imbalance. Those capable of fulfilling these desires wield substantial influence over individuals ensnared in the web of indoctrination. The concept of manufactured desires, arising from indoctrination, emerges as a central facet of psychological bondage. These artificially generated wants render individuals vulnerable to external manipulation, perpetuating the power imbalance between those who can fulfill these desires and those fervently seeking their fulfillment. In conclusion, the narrative illuminates the intricate relationship between labor and fundamental necessities within the framework of psychological entrapment. The meticulously designed indoctrination system, often masquerading as societal regulations, prescribes the specific paths individuals are compelled to follow in order to fulfill their vital needs. This reinforces existing power dynamics, amplifying individuals' reliance on established avenues for meeting their requirements. In essence, this narrative artfully intertwines a myriad of thoughts, inviting readers to navigate the intricate labyrinth of human conditioning and its profound implications on our individual and collective consciousness.
Unraveling the Nexus of Indoctrination, Pleasure Hormones, and Automatic Responses through Pavlovian Insight. Lecture 5. Original. September 4, 2023. Greetings to the esteemed audience of ladies and distinguished gentlemen. Today's discourse employs Pavlov's classical conditioning framework to illustrate how an indoctrination system has implanted a false worldview within us through various means. This system exerts a profound impact on our consciousness, to the extent that mental enslavement is normalized within the fabric of our lives. While this discourse provides ample evidence for many to affirm the predetermined nature of our behavior, stemming from the orchestrated indoctrination system's agenda ingrained in our consciousness from our very inception, a second part of this lecture will further expound upon this reality. During our previous conference, I introduced a thought-provoking query. Have you ever contemplated the reasons behind the ease with which through certain activities we experience joy, while others demand substantial effort? Through the lens of Pavlov's classical conditioning, we embark on a journey to unveil a fundamental aspect of our decision-making process, an orchestrated indoctrination of mental bondage. This doctrine gradually weaves itself into our consciousness from the earliest days of our existence. Our perspectives and actions find grounding in the shaping of our emotions, revealing patterns of mental subjugation and a worldview that becomes imprinted in our minds. This predisposes us to instinctively respond to every encountered situation. Our current discourse delves deeper into how Pavlov's classical conditioning sheds light on the notion that we've been trained to respond automatically, casting a shadow on the notion of free will. Moreover, we explore the intricate connections between Pavlov's classical conditioning and the activities we become conditioned to, leading to the release of pleasure-inducing hormones upon engagement. This exploration serves as a window into the process through which we've been ingrained to be drawn towards specific material objects, individuals, and situations, while simultaneously being inclined to steer clear of others. These automatic attractions for specific elements, people, and scenarios are woven into our consciousness through various avenues: entertainment, literature, media, parental guidance, friendships, religious teachings, educational influences, and the community around us. The foundation of these influences rests upon the bedrock of indoctrinated mental bondage. Furthermore, we'll delve into the clarification of terms related to Pavlov's classical conditioning, such as conditioned stimulus, conditioned response, unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response, and neutral stimulus. Real-life examples will serve as guideposts to illustrate these concepts. Drawing inspiration from Pavlov's classical conditioning, particularly his experiments with dogs, we venture into a pivotal facet of our cognitive framework, the process by which we become conditioned to derive pleasure from specific activities. This pleasure is intrinsically linked to the release of hormones within our bodies during these engagements. Likewise, we embark on an exploration of our inherent tendency to shy away from activities that could potentially benefit us. As we traverse this intellectual terrain, we'll uncover intriguing parallels between Pavlov's classical conditioning and the phenomenon of individuals becoming conditioned to the release of pleasure hormones during specific activities. Additionally, an introduction awaits you to stress hormones such as cortisol, adrenaline, and noradrenaline. Within this context, we will dissect their roles in psychological conditions, including depression and anxiety. As we immerse ourselves in the pages that lie ahead, we will navigate through the intricate landscape of human conditioning, meticulously untangling the threads that compose our automatic responses and the nuanced mechanisms that underlie them. I extend a heartfelt invitation for you to accompany me on this journey, one that promises not only the acquisition of knowledge but also the elevation of our awareness regarding the complex symphony orchestrating our mental landscape. In the preceding discourse, I presented an intriguing question: can we agree that many individuals gravitate towards non-work-related activities, such as watching movies, playing games, dining either at home or outside, or engaging in conversations with friends? This preference raises a fundamental inquiry: why do these leisurely pursuits often evoke more pleasure than engaging in work-related tasks? To delve into this phenomenon, it proves insightful to investigate why certain activities act as triggers for the brain and internal organs to release pleasure hormones such as endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. This exploration aids in comprehending the intricate biochemical responses of the body to what we commonly label as enjoyable endeavors. The intricacy deepens as we observe that not all activities stimulating pleasure hormones yield uniform effects on every individual. Many people do not experience the same pleasurable response to all activities considered to induce pleasure. This prompts consideration: could the activity itself be inconsequential in triggering the release of pleasure hormones? Alternatively,
Could the unique predisposition of each individual be the driving force behind the hormone release in response to particular activities? Crucially, it's imperative to recognize that many of these so-called pleasurable activities are the products of conditioned values that have been imprinted in our consciousness through various mediums. Reflecting on a past lecture, I presented a scenario where a child witnesses his father's exuberant reaction, filled with jubilation and enthusiasm, as his favorite team wins the World Cup. This spectacle imprints on the child that such behavior is warranted in such triumphant moments. Consequently, the child is introduced to a behavioral model where the victory of his favored team demands such exultation. Moreover, I posited that even if the child held an opposing view to that of his father, his stance would still be influenced by his father's conduct. Considering this present perspective, that child who greatly admires her father internalizes a reaction similar to her father's during similar events. Doesn't this exemplify how we can be conditioned during our formative years to elicit the release of pleasure hormones? Many activities that trigger these hormonal releases gradually become woven into our preferences due to consistent associations with social interactions. To illustrate, let's say you initially have no affinity for chess. However, a friend whom you greatly enjoy spending time with frequently engages in the game during your interactions. The desire to share this company motivates you to learn, and eventually, your interest evolves into a genuine enthusiasm for chess. As emotions become shaped to perceive certain activities as pleasurable and others as laborious or uninteresting, an automatic cascade of pleasure hormones becomes activated in response to these so-called pleasure-inducing activities. This phenomenon is reminiscent of the well-known classical conditioning experiment, often referred to as Pavlov's dogs, named after the Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov. It's plausible to consider that individuals who exhibit a preference for pleasurable activities over work-related ones might have experienced a more favorable emotional response towards work-related tasks if the working environment had been conducive, coupled with optimal physical and mental well-being. The link between good mental and physical health and a heightened capacity to withstand emotional challenges cannot be ignored. Nevertheless, we must also acknowledge that even those initially in apparent good health might gradually succumb to the influences of a work environment that initially seemed promising. Before we explore the commonalities between Pavlov's classical conditioning and learned behaviors that trigger the release of pleasure hormones, let's establish a solid understanding of Pavlov's classical conditioning and its associated terminology. A well-detailed explanation examples of these terminologies are provided at the end of the lecture. These key terms encompass conditioned stimulus, conditioned response, unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response, unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response, and neutral stimulus. Each of these terms necessitates precise elucidation and illustrative examples to foster clarity. Defining and demonstrating Pavlov's classical conditioning concepts. Pavlov's classical conditioning embodies a psychological principle wherein a previously neutral stimulus becomes interconnected with a reflexive response through repetitive pairings. This association results in the neutral stimulus inducing the response autonomously, unveiling a form of learned behavior. To simplify, classical conditioning represents a psychological notion in which a neutral element becomes entwined with a natural reaction after numerous pairings. This metamorphoses the once neutral element into a trigger for the response itself, underscoring the acquisition of knowledge. To comprehend the foundational terminologies of Pavlov's classical conditioning, consider the following explanations. Important terms related to Pavlov's classical conditioning in a simpler way. Conditioned. This word means something has been trained or changed through learning. For example, think of an athlete who gets stronger after months of training. Stimulus. A stimulus is something that makes an organism, like a person or an animal, react. For instance, when someone shines a bright light in your eyes, your pupils get smaller, and the light is the stimulus causing this reaction. Conditioned. This term refers to something that has been changed or influenced through learning and being connected to another thing. For example, in Pavlov's experiment, a dog's salivation response to a bell, which was originally just a sound, becoming linked with food is an example of a conditioned response. Conditioned stimulus. This is something that used to be neutral, it didn't mean anything, but becomes a trigger for a reaction because it's paired with something else exciting. Think of a bell that, when rung before mealtime many times, makes your mouth water, even if there's no food around. Unconditioned stimulus. This is something that naturally and automatically makes you react, like when you touch a hot stove, and your hand pulls back instantly. Unconditioned response. It's the quick and automatic reaction your body does naturally, like pulling your hand away when it touches something hot, without needing to learn it. Neutral stimulus. This is like a regular thing that doesn't make anyone react in any special way at first. But if you connect it with something exciting or important consistently, it can become something that makes people or animals react. So, in simple terms, these are words that help us understand how we learn and react to things around us. They're like building blocks to understand how our brains and bodies work. Let's delve into the practical applications of these terminologies. Begin with the unconditioned stimulus, an element that naturally triggers a predetermined response. For instance, the aroma of your favorite food, representing the unconditioned stimulus, could elicit salivation without conscious effort, a phenomenon termed as the unconditioned response. Conversely, a neutral stimulus typically lacks the power to elicit any discernible reaction. Imagine the sound of a bell as a neutral stimulus, it fails to prompt salivation or any distinctive response. However, through repetitive exposure, intriguing developments unfold. When the neutral stimulus, like the sound of the bell, is consistently paired with the unconditioned stimulus, such as your favorite food, the neutral stimulus morphs into a conditioned stimulus. In the aforementioned scenario, after numerous instances of hearing the bell, now a conditioned stimulus, the presence of your favorite food, the unconditioned stimulus, might trigger salivation, the conditioned response, solely upon hearing the bell sound, even if the food isn't present. This sequence mirrors the initial unconditioned response. Pavlov's classical conditioning, in essence, embodies a progression wherein a neutral element, through repetitive association with another element evoking a response, takes on the ability to elicit the same response independently. For instance, consider the following scenarios where Pavlov's classical conditioning is evident. 1. Children conditioned for careers. Parents consistently praising and rewarding a child for their artistic talents can lead the child to associate those talents with positive reinforcement. Consequently, the child may develop an interest in pursuing a career in the arts, linking their talents to a rewarding path. 2. Assimilation of negative reactions to certain activities. Receiving repeated negative reactions or criticism when engaging in a particular activity can prompt individuals to associate that activity with negative emotions. Consequently, they might avoid the activity to prevent further negativity. 3. constant exposure to media's portrayal of beauty * consistent exposure to media's portrayal of idealized beauty standards can lead individuals to associate those standards with attractiveness. This exposure can drive a desire to conform to these standards to attain societal acceptance. 4. Employees' fear of the boss * regular exposure to harsh criticism or punishment from a boss can condition employees to associate their boss with fear and anxiety. This leads to a conditioned response of apprehension and submissiveness in the presence of the boss. To illustrate the application of Pavlov's classical conditioning in another scenario, consider how the fear of a boss can be ingrained in an individual's mind from an early age. Pavlov's classical conditioning can help us understand how individuals might develop a fear of their boss during their formative years. In this context, the boss serves as the conditioned stimulus, evoking fear, and the fear response itself becomes the conditioned response. 1. Unconditioned stimulus * initially, the boss is not inherently linked to fear. However, exposure to media, parental discussions, movies, and interactions with authoritative figures can portray bosses as intimidating or authoritarian. 2. Unconditioned response * initially, there is no fear response connected to the boss. 3. Conditioned stimulus * over time, due to exposure to these influences, the boss's image becomes associated with authority or power, initiating the conditioning process. 4. Conditioned response * subsequently, encountering the boss or even contemplating them triggers a fear response that has been depicted in media or discussed by others. This conditioned fear response becomes associated with the boss. Consider a character in a soap opera consistently portraying their boss as demanding and critical. This portrayal could influence individuals to associate those traits with their real-life bosses. Similarly, parental conversations about difficulties with bosses can shape perceptions. Repeated exposure to such associations across various contexts can result in an automatic fear response toward bosses even before individuals reach maturity. This fear can impact their interactions, behavior, and career decisions. This exemplifies how classical conditioning molds emotional responses through learned associations. These instances underscore how Pavlov's classical conditioning manifests in daily life, shaping learned behaviors and responses through repeated stimulus-response associations. Another hypothetical example involving Pavlov's classical conditioning demonstrates how an individual might become a racist supremacist through association with racists and upbringing in a racially biased environment. It's important to acknowledge that while this example illustrates a possible scenario, it's a simplified explanation for comprehension purposes. Let's imagine a hypothetical situation. In this example, a child named Alex grows up in a family where racist beliefs and attitudes are prevalent. Alex's parents and other family members frequently express discriminatory views and engage in racist behavior. This creates an environment in which Alex is repeatedly exposed to racist ideologies. Through classical conditioning, Alex's association with racist individuals and the repeated exposure to their beliefs can shape his perception of other races. Here's a possible scenario. 1. Unconditioned stimulus. Alex's family members express racist beliefs and engage in discriminatory behaviors. 2. Unconditioned response. Alex observes and internalizes these racist attitudes and behaviors. 3. Neutral stimulus. Alex encounters other racist individuals outside of the family who share similar beliefs. 4. Conditioning. Over time, Alex begins to associate the presence of other racists or neutral stimulus with the racist beliefs and behaviors displayed by their family members or unconditioned stimulus. 5. Conditioned stimulus. The presence of other racists becomes a conditioned stimulus that triggers a response. 6. Conditioned response. Alex develops racist beliefs and attitudes towards individuals from other races as a result of the conditioned stimulus. In this example, repeated exposure to racist family members and the association with other racists outside the family can lead to the internalization of racist beliefs and the development of a racist supremacist perspective. It is important to note that this example is a simplified representation of a complex process, and individual experiences can vary significantly. The influence of media and the environment on individuals' perception of success is notable. Pavlov's classical conditioning, which involves associating a neutral stimulus with a reflexive response through repeated pairing, can help elucidate how material possessions and social status have become synonymous with success due to the repeated pairing of these elements with positive emotions and rewards. Here are 5 practical examples illustrating this phenomenon. 1. Advertisements. Advertisements often feature individuals with lavish possessions and glamorous lifestyles, linking these attributes to feelings of happiness, admiration, and success. Over time, individuals can develop associations between these possessions and positive emotions. 2. Social media. Platforms like Instagram and Facebook frequently showcase individuals highlighting their material wealth and social achievements. The act of sharing and receiving positive feedback conditions people to perceive the acquisition of similar possessions and status as essential for achieving success. 3. Celebrity culture. Media portrayal of celebrities as models of success, with opulent lifestyles and possessions, reinforces the connection between wealth, status, and accomplishment. This perpetuates the belief that these symbols are integral to success. 4. Cultural norms. Societal values often emphasize material possessions and social status as indicators of success. Societal expectations, such as owning a large home, driving an expensive car, or wearing prestigious brands, further reinforce these associations. 5. Peer influence. Observing peers prioritize material wealth and social status can condition individuals to associate these markers with personal success. Positive reactions received by these individuals further solidify these associations. It's important to recognize that personal definitions of success can vary considerably, despite these external influences. However, the impact of external markers of success on the younger generation is substantial, leading some to engage in various activities, even those that are illicit or risky, in pursuit of the lifestyle propagated by the media and endorsed by peers. Pavlov's classical conditioning can also offer insights into how individuals link specific careers to happiness and a higher quality of life while associating other careers with submission and inferiority. This process can be broken down using the classical conditioning framework. 1. Unconditioned stimulus. Initially, careers like being a doctor or lawyer are not inherently linked to happiness or a better quality of life. Similarly, careers like being a doorman or a cleaning lady are not inherently tied to submission or inferiority. 2. Unconditioned response. Initially, there are no specific emotional responses attached to these careers. 3. Conditioned stimulus. Exposure to media, soap operas, movies, and interactions with family, friends, and older individuals shape perceptions of certain careers. Professions like doctors and lawyers may be depicted as successful, respected, and enjoying a higher quality of life. Conversely, careers like being a doorman or a cleaning lady may be portrayed as less prestigious or fulfilling. 4. Conditioned response. As individuals encounter or contemplate these careers, conditioned emotional responses are triggered. Therefore, thoughts of becoming a doctor or lawyer evoke associations with happiness and a better quality of life. Conversely, thoughts of being a doorman or a cleaning lady evoke associations with submission and inferiority. For instance, if the media portrays doctors and lawyers as wealthy, influential, and leading luxurious lives, individuals may link these qualities with those professions. Similarly, hearing anecdotes from parents or older individuals about the challenges of being a doorman or a cleaning lady can shape perceptions of those careers. This conditioning process can impact career choices, as individuals naturally gravitate towards professions associated with positive emotions and a higher quality of life. Classical conditioning helps elucidate how societal cues, media, and interpersonal interactions shape perceptions of various careers, thereby influencing career choices and attitudes. Here are 10 additional observations gleaned from Pavlov's classical conditioning experiments. 1. Extinction. If the conditioned stimulus is repeatedly presented without the unconditioned stimulus, the conditioned response weakens and eventually dissipates. 2. Spontaneous recovery. Following a period of rest, the conditioned response can transiently re-emerge upon the presentation of the conditioned stimulus. 3. Generalization. Stimuli resembling the conditioned stimulus can evoke similar responses, illustrating a broadening of the learned association. 4. Discrimination. Organisms can acquire the ability to discern between akin stimuli and selectively respond to the conditioned stimulus. 5. Higher-order conditioning. A conditioned stimulus can function as an unconditioned stimulus to establish a novel conditioned stimulus-response linkage. 6. Delayed conditioning. Optimal learning occurs when the conditioned stimulus precedes the unconditioned stimulus, overlapping with it. 7. Trace conditioning. Learning persists even with a gap between the conditioned stimulus and the unconditioned stimulus, although it is less effective than delayed conditioning. 8. Conditioning and emotions. Emotional responses can be classically conditioned, engendering associations between stimuli and emotional reactions. 9. Conditioned taste aversion. Animals can develop aversions to specific tastes by linking them to adverse outcomes, even with a substantial delay between consumption and consequence. 10. Conditioned physiological responses. Classical conditioning can induce the development of physiological responses, such as elevated heart rate or shifts in hormone levels, in anticipation of the conditioned stimulus. Drawing parallelisms between Pavlov's classical conditioning and pleasure-inducing activities in the preceding discourse, we undertook a comprehensive exploration of Pavlov's classical conditioning and its associated terminology, and provided tangible instances of its manifestation. Now, let us delve into the captivating parallels connecting Pavlov's classical conditioning with the phenomenon of individuals becoming conditioned to activities that trigger the release of pleasure hormones. The proclivity towards activities yielding pleasurable outcomes finds its foundation in experiential learning. At some juncture in the past, these activities facilitated the establishment of fresh neural connections within the nervous system. Simultaneously, the release of pleasure hormones from distinct internal bodily domains played a role in embedding these experiences within memory, fostering a yearning to replicate these activities whenever the opportunity arises. 13 comparisons demonstrating parallels. 1. Association. Both classical conditioning and conditioned activities linked to pleasure hormone release involve the establishment of associations between stimuli/actions and the experience of pleasure. Example for Pavlov's classical conditioning: a dog associating the sound of a bell with food arrival, leading to salivation even without the presence of food. Example of conditioned activities with pleasure hormones: a person associating eating chocolate with the release of endorphins, inducing a sense of pleasure and contentment. 2. Reinforcement. Both processes are reinforced by the pleasurable sensations experienced, enhancing the likelihood of behavior repetition. Example for Pavlov's classical conditioning: a child receiving praise for sharing toys fosters an increased tendency to share in the future. Example of conditioned activities with pleasure hormones: a person experiencing euphoria after exercise, reinforcing the habit of regular workouts. 3. Contextual cues. Contextual cues present in the environment trigger responses in both classical conditioning and learned activities tied to pleasure hormone release. Example for Pavlov's classical conditioning: a student feeling anxious upon entering an exam hall due to the association with exam-related stress. Example of conditioned activities with pleasure hormones: feeling a surge of dopamine upon entering a casino due to the anticipation of gambling rewards. 4. Generalization. Both Pavlov's classical conditioning and activities leading to pleasure hormone release can result in generalized responses to similar stimuli/activities. Example of Pavlov's classical conditioning: a dog salivating to similar bell sounds after being conditioned with a specific bell. Example for conditioned activities with pleasure hormones: finding joy in various music genres sharing common characteristics. 5. Extinction. In both cases, the conditioned response may diminish or disappear when the connection to positive outcomes weakens. Example of Pavlov's classical conditioning: diminishing salivation response if the bell is repeatedly presented without food. Example for conditioned activities with pleasure hormones: diminishing release of pleasure hormones upon discontinuation of a pleasurable hobby. 6. Spontaneous recovery. Both processes can display spontaneous recovery, with the previously conditioned response resurfacing after a period. Example of Pavlov's classical conditioning: the dog spontaneously salivating again when the bell is reintroduced after a break. Example of conditioned activities with pleasure hormones: experiencing renewed pleasure in playing a musical instrument after a hiatus. 7. Conditioning effects. Over time, both classical conditioning and activities leading to pleasure hormone release can result in habit formation and automatic behavior. Example of Pavlov's classical conditioning: imagine a person named Sarah who relishes moments by the ocean. As time passes, the sound of waves and the ocean experience become linked to the pleasure of eating ice cream. Gradually, proximity to the ocean triggers a craving for ice cream, showcasing habit formation and automaticity. Example of conditioning to activities that induce pleasure hormones: consider David, who derives pleasure from playing the guitar. With consistent playing, his brain associates guitar playing with the pleasurable release of endorphins. This connection results in habitual guitar playing when seeking positive emotional responses. 8. Timing and contiguity. Both processes rely on the timing relationship between conditioned stimuli/activities and positive outcomes. Example of Pavlov's classical conditioning: the bell's presentation preceding food to establish a strong association. Example of conditioned activities with pleasure hormones: timely release of pleasure hormones during eating, socializing, or hobbies for a positive experience. 9. Individual differences. Variations in responses across individuals can be observed in both Pavlov's classical conditioning and conditioned activities releasing pleasure hormones. Example for Pavlov's classical conditioning: different dogs displaying varying salivation responses to the same conditioned stimulus. Example for conditioned activities with pleasure hormones: individuals find joy in different activities releasing pleasure hormones, such as exercise or creative pursuits. 10. Conditioning transfer. Both processes involve the transfer of conditioned responses from one stimulus/activity to another. Example for Pavlov's classical conditioning: a dog conditioned to salivate at one bell sound also salivating at the sound of a similar bell. Example of conditioned activities with pleasure hormones: experiencing joy when listening to others play the same instrument one enjoys playing. 11. Motivation. Both classical conditioning and conditioned activities with pleasure hormones can act as motivators, compelling individuals to seek out stimuli/behaviors linked to pleasure. Example of conditioning to activities that induce pleasure hormones: John enjoys running in the park, releasing endorphins that create euphoria. As he associates running with endorphin release, he becomes motivated to run regularly. Example of Pavlov's classical conditioning: Alex, a coffee enthusiast, associates the sound of a coffee grinder with the pleasure of coffee consumption. This anticipation motivates Alex to seek out the coffee drinking experience. 12. Emotional response. Both processes evoke positive emotional responses and feelings of enjoyment, satisfaction, or reward. An example of Pavlov's classical conditioning: feeling anxious or fearful upon hearing a siren due to its association with emergencies. Example of conditioned activities with pleasure hormones: experiencing happiness and relaxation during activities like meditation or spending time in nature due to endorphin release. 13. Neural pathways. Both processes involve the formation and strengthening of neural pathways connecting stimuli/actions with the release of pleasure hormones. Example of Pavlov's classical conditioning: Alex enjoys the scent of lavender, which becomes linked to the calming experience of drinking tea. Neural pathways form, associating the fragrance with relaxation. Example of conditioning to activities that induce pleasure hormones: Lisa derives satisfaction from post-workout endorphin release. With repeated workouts, her brain forms neural connections associating exercise with endorphin release. These examples underscore the shared principles between Pavlov's classical conditioning and conditioned activities triggering pleasure hormone release. The parallels emphasize the intricate interplay of stimuli, responses, and pleasurable experiences. Moreover, both processes involve a significant learning component, where individuals learn to associate specific actions or stimuli with the release of pleasure hormones. In the intricate tapestry of human physiological responses, just as pleasure hormones surge forth in various contexts, unregulated stress hormones also occupy a significant role, particularly in the realm of psychological disorders. To gain a deeper understanding, let us embark on simplified elucidations of the biochemical processes underpinning 4 of the most prevalent psychological disorders, along with their manifestations in affected individuals. However, it's crucial to note that these examples serve as mere glimpses, unable to encompass the full spectrum of symptoms and encounters associated with these complex disorders. Central to the hormonal landscape within these disorders are hormones categorized under the umbrella term, stress hormones, or stress response. These hormones are dispatched by the body as part of the primal fight or flight response, a physiological reaction to perceived threats or stressors. This cascade of responses encompasses the activation of the sympathetic nervous system and the release of diverse hormones, including 1. Cortisol. Reputed as the cornerstone stress hormone, cortisol steps into the limelight in response to stress, orchestrating the regulation of metabolic functions, immune responses, and blood sugar levels. Within the context of psychological disorders, heightened cortisol levels intertwine with chronic stress, depression, and anxiety. 2. Adrenaline. Epinephrine. In the presence of immediate stress or danger, adrenaline surges forth. It orchestrates the acceleration of heart rate, dilation of airways, and redirection of blood flow to vital organs, priming the body for swift action. In the realm of anxiety disorders, an overly active stress response can result in the release of adrenaline even in non-threatening scenarios. 3. Noradrenaline. Norepinephrine. Similar to adrenaline, noradrenaline steps onto the stage in times of stress. It exerts its influence over mood, attention, and alertness. In conditions such as depression and bipolar disorder, the equilibrium of norepinephrine can be perturbed. These hormones navigate the intricate terrain of modulating the body's physiological retorts to stressors and challenges. However, in certain scenarios, such as chronic stress or the presence of specific psychological disorders, the stress response veers off course, entailing imbalances in these hormones. This, in turn, converges into the symptoms and experiences synonymous with these multifaceted disorders. Let's embark on a voyage through the realms of 4 commonplace psychological disorders, deciphering their internal biochemical mechanisms and the orchestration of hormone release. 1. Depression. Depression is entwined with perturbations in neurotransmitters, such as serotonin and norepinephrine, pivotal regulators of mood and emotion. Diminished serotonin levels can engender feelings of despondency and melancholy. Concurrently, the coalescence of chronic stress and depression can propel the release of cortisol, the stress hormone, which casts its shadow on mood regulation. Example: an individual grappling with depression might wrestle with enduring low spirits, a waning interest in activities, and a pervasive sense of hopelessness. These emotional contours can be traced back to diminished serotonin levels. 2. Anxiety disorders. The terrain of anxiety disorders unfolds with a hyperactive amygdala at the helm, orchestrating the fight or flight response. Within this territory, the amygdala perceives threats even in their absence, triggering a cascade of stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. These hormones thrust the body into a state of readiness for rapid action, precipitating the symptoms of anxiety. Example: within the sphere of generalized anxiety disorder, GAD, an individual might be plagued by disproportionate worry and restlessness, even in the context of mundane situations. The amygdala's hyperactivity and the subsequent surge in stress hormones shape the perpetual climate of anxiety. 3. Schizophrenia. Schizophrenia unfurls against the backdrop of dopamine's dysregulation, a neurotransmitter synonymous with reward and pleasure pathways. An excessive surge in dopamine activity can herald positive symptoms like hallucinations and delusions. Moreover, stress's arrival can summon forth the release of stress hormones, exacerbating the existing symptoms. Example: an individual navigating schizophrenia might grapple with auditory hallucinations, conversations unheard by others. These phenomena can be traced back to the fluctuations in dopamine equilibrium within the brain. 4. Bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder waltzes to the rhythm of neurotransmitter imbalances, serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine, its partners in motion. During manic episodes, dopamine claims the spotlight, engendering elevated mood and impulsive behavior. In the throes of depressive episodes, serotonin imbalances contribute to the doldrums. Example: in the throes of a manic episode, a person might exude heightened energy, diminished need for sleep, and venturesome conduct, all underpinned by escalated dopamine levels. Classical conditioning, originally elucidated by Ivan Pavlov, embodies a form of learning in which a neutral stimulus assumes an association with a significant stimulus, culminating in the emergence of a conditioned response. Mirroring this cognitive framework, the tapestry of societal norms exerts a palpable sway over our behavioral inclinations and actions, forging intricate connections between specific behaviors and their attendant favorable or unfavorable consequences. This intricate interplay crafts our behavioral repertoire, sculpting our responses across an array of situations. A tangible exemplar of this dynamic lies in the metamorphosis achieved through the adoption of a whole food diet, engagement in regular exercise, and cultivation of meditation, collectively elevating the quality of life. Nevertheless, it's imperative to underscore that the reverberations transcend the immediate milieu. Our central focus gravitates towards the concept of indoctrination, a notion underscoring the acquisition of comprehensive knowledge. Within the realm of fostering an augmented state of well-being through the deliberate embrace of a positive lifestyle, it emerges that the individual embarking on this transformative odyssey must be armed with prior information concerning the constituents and attributes of a whole food diet. As previously expounded, the tenets of classical conditioning unfold as an unconditioned stimulus instinctively triggers an unconditioned response. The repetitive pairing of a neutral stimulus with the unconditioned stimulus culminates in the neutral stimulus's evolution into a conditioned stimulus. This, in turn, begets a conditioned response analogous to the unconditioned response. The iconic illustration of this phenomenon rests in Pavlov's dogs, where the resonance of a bell becomes entwined with sustenance, leading the dogs to salivate even in the absence of food. While indoctrination quietly underpins our emotions and individual and communal behaviors, its subtle influences manifest prominently as societal norms. These norms orchestrate akin mechanisms by uniting behaviors with communal repercussions. Essentially, these unwritten guidelines govern behavior, assimilated through interactions with others and immersion in cultural values. A quintessential instance is a norm surrounding eye contact, where many cultures perceive it as an indicator of respect and involvement, juxtaposed with a lack thereof implying disinterest or impoliteness. Illustrative instances of societal conditioning. 1. Gender roles. Societal norms wield substantial sway over our comprehension of gender roles. From an early age, children are inculcated with the linkage of specific behaviors, attire, and interests to their designated gender. Boys often receive encouragement to be resolute and shun vulnerability, while girls are nudged towards nurturing tendencies and away from assertiveness. 2. Personal space. Distinct cultures adopt varying norms concerning personal space. While some cultures gravitate towards closer proximity during dialogues, others venerate maintaining more substantial distances as an emblem of courtesy. These norms can foment discomfort during interactions across cultural boundaries. 3. Body image. Societal norms intricately shape our perceptions of beauty and corporeal ideals. Media depictions of an archetypal physique can propel individuals towards these benchmarks, occasionally begetting body dissatisfaction and, at times, even triggering eating disorders. 4. Social hierarchy. Societal norms invariably delineate hierarchies and power dynamics. We internalize the precept to honor authoritative figures and heed their directives. This indoctrination is palpable in diverse contexts, spanning from educational and professional spheres to broader societal constructs. 5. Language use. Linguistic choices are also ensnared by societal norms, with certain expressions or terms being deemed impolite or offensive in specific contexts. People adroitly calibrate their language to align with these norms, averting offense or social repercussions. 6. Consumerism. The realms of advertising and consumer culture wield substantial influence in conditioning individuals to conjoin products with particular emotions or desires. Jingles, logos, and imagery harnessed in advertising can kindle specific responses or cravings. 7. Patriotism. Societal norms shape sentiments of patriotism and national pride. Individuals are nudged to equate their nation with affirmative attributes, engendering emotional ripostes during national events or discussions. While classical conditioning manifests as a more intrinsic process underpinned by physiological responses, societal conditioning often ensues through intricate cognitive and social factors. Nevertheless, both processes poignantly underscore how associations fostered via recurrent experiences can significantly mold our behaviors and retorts across diverse contexts. The intricate relationship between Pavlovian classical conditioning and indoctrination unveils the profound synergy between these psychological processes. Throughout our developmental journey, we encounter a diverse array of stimuli that trigger emotional reactions, which are subsequently reinforced through acquired associations. These associations serve as the bedrock upon which our decisions, responses, and perceptions are constructed, effectively constraining us within the boundaries of our indoctrinated convictions. The nexus between Pavlovian classical conditioning and indoctrination is a compelling subject, offering insights into the transformation of our emotional responses into automated choices that ultimately shape our lived reality. Pavlov's groundbreaking experiments with dogs paved the way for comprehending how neutral stimuli can become intertwined with significant occurrences, resulting in conditioned responses. Through his investigations, the unconditioned stimulus, in this case food, elicited an unconditioned response, in this case salivation. By repetitively pairing a neutral stimulus, in this case bell, with the unconditioned stimulus, the bell evolved into a conditioned stimulus that could evoke a conditioned response, in this case salivation. This phenomenon underscores the potency of learned associations and highlights the triggering capacity of external cues for prompting automatic reactions. From our early years, we are exposed to ideologies and values that evoke emotional responses. Analogous to the bell's role in triggering salivation in Pavlov's dogs, specific cues in our lives incite emotional reactions aligned with our indoctrinated beliefs. For instance, growing up in an environment that esteems conformity may lead to discomfort when straying from societal norms. Whether within Pavlov's laboratory or our day-to-day experiences, our responses to stimuli are fundamentally automated. Just as the dog salivated at the sound of the bell, we too react emotionally to diverse cues without conscious contemplation. These automatic responses are rooted in the associations formed through conditioning, an essential instrument in the orchestration of the indoctrination agenda. Thus, we find ourselves predisposed to emotional reactivity regarding subjects such as religion, politics, and social issues. Parallel to Pavlov's dogs, who couldn't differentiate between the bell and food, our emotional associations mold our perception of reality. Should we have been inculcated to associate success with material wealth, our perception becomes inextricably entwined with the pursuit of financial gain. The intricate interplay between Pavlovian classical conditioning and indoctrination unveils the multifaceted connections interweaving emotions, perceptions, and choices. Across laboratory settings and societal contexts, learned associations and automatic responses wield significant influence over our behaviors. The recognition of these mechanisms empowers us to traverse our reality with heightened awareness, harboring the potential to break free from the constraints of conditioned reactions. While the notion of liberating oneself from indoctrination through critical examination and cognitive reassessment holds promise, deeper scrutiny reveals the formidable nature of automatic responses and emotional conditioning. In essence, the deeply ingrained character of emotional responses and automatic reactions complicates the aspiration of achieving genuine emancipation from indoctrination. The underlying emotional composition that dictates our automatic responses is imprinted through repeated exposure to specific stimuli. These responses are frequently anchored in early experiences and fortified by ongoing interactions with our surroundings. While altering beliefs, preferences, and choices may be plausible, the foundational emotional framework governing our automatic responses remains deeply entrenched. This emotional groundwork is molded over time and remains resistant to transformation through mere intellectual analysis. A pivotal challenge in liberating oneself from indoctrination lies in the subtle nature of automatic responses. These responses transpire unconsciously, guided by emotions that have been ingrained since infancy. Analogous to Pavlov's dogs spontaneously salivating, humans similarly exhibit automatic responses to an array of stimuli. The ingrained nature of these reactions often operates beneath the realm of conscious thought, rendering them elusive to identification and modification. Although critical examination and cognitive reassessment possess formidable potential, their efficacy is not impervious to the influence of emotional conditioning. Our intellectual faculties themselves are shaped by the emotional responses forged over time. Consequently, attempting to scrutinize and challenge indoctrinated beliefs utilizing these faculties may be impeded by the very emotional responses under examination. This results in the creation of an illusion of autonomy and objectivity, concealing the profound extent to which our thoughts and perceptions are molded by our conditioned emotions. Breaking the shackles of indoctrination necessitates a profound transformation in emotional resonance, an aspect often underestimated. Emotional responses function within specific frequencies, molded by years of conditioning. These frequencies dictate our interpretation of reality, influencing our perceptions and governing our reactions to various scenarios. While intellectual analysis may facilitate adjustments in certain aspects of our lives, the underlying emotional frequencies that form the basis of our core reactions remain remarkably resistant to modification. Despite these challenges, the journey to break free from indoctrination begins with self-awareness. The first step involves recognizing how emotional conditioning shapes our thoughts, automatic reactions, and perceptions. To achieve this, we can use introspection, meditation, and connect with our higher self. We'll delve into this later. These practices are essential for liberating ourselves from indoctrination's hold. Once we become aware of the subtle impact of automatic responses driven by indoctrination, we can critically examine and reevaluate our beliefs with a more nuanced perspective. This process sets the stage for gradual transformation. The elusive nature of liberating oneself from indoctrination serves as a testament to the formidable impact of emotional conditioning and automatic responses. Facilitating true liberation necessitates navigating the intricate labyrinth of emotions woven over time. It is through the persistent cultivation of introspective practices, augmented by meditation and connection with our higher self, that individuals can embark on a journey to dismantle the bonds of indoctrination, embracing a more authentic and liberated existence. The intricate interplay between instilled perceptions of reality, automatic responses, and emotional conditioning triggers contemplation about the extent to which orchestrated indoctrination wields control over individuals. The potential of indoctrination to instill beliefs, values, and emotional responses within our consciousness underscores its capacity to forge a form of mental bondage. When individuals are subjected to meticulously designed indoctrination, their consciousness becomes interwoven with specific ideologies and viewpoints. These beliefs, intertwined through emotional conditioning and automatic responses, can lead individuals to willingly subject themselves to servitude. In essence, this mental bondage is a product of the seamless fusion of emotional responses and conditioned beliefs that dictate the decisions and actions of individuals. A hallmark of well-orchestrated indoctrination is its ability to elicit voluntary submission from individuals to its established doctrines. This submission is largely driven by the pervasive influence of automatic responses, deeply ingrained through emotional conditioning. These responses wield substantial influence, compelling individuals to adhere to the principles of their indoctrination. Just as Pavlov's dogs involuntarily salivated upon hearing a bell, individuals under the sway of indoctrination may find themselves compelled to align with specific ideologies, even when those ideologies diverge from their best interests. Pavlov's experiment, which explored conditioned responses in dogs, provides a distinctive perspective for comprehending the prevailing mental captivity within indoctrinated consciousness. While the experiment focused on animals, its foundational principle offers insights into the intricate ways human minds can be conditioned. This experiment can be metaphorically viewed as an allegory that mirrors the automatic submission of individuals, achieved through a distorted perception of reality, an emblem of mental bondage perpetuated by well-orchestrated indoctrination. Just as the dogs in Pavlov's experiment involuntarily linked the sound of a bell to the anticipation of food, humans too frequently associate particular actions, thoughts, and emotions with rewards or consequences within their perceived reality. Consider a scenario in which a student, consistently praised by their teacher for participating actively in class discussions, begins to involuntarily associate such participation with positive reinforcement and rewards. This association becomes deeply ingrained, prompting the student to contribute actively to class discussions without conscious deliberation. However, this association is structured within the context of pursuing material objectives rather than character development. Similarly, envision a person who consistently faces negative consequences, such as ridicule or rejection, when expressing their genuine opinions or beliefs in a particular social setting. Over time, this individual may involuntarily associate voicing their thoughts with negative societal outcomes, fostering hesitancy or fear regarding open expression. They might adopt self-censorship, refraining from sharing their ideas even if they firmly believe in them. In this case, introspection and emotional balance can offer a way to perceive the workings of indoctrination through awareness of automatic responses to challenges. These examples illustrate how past experiences can shape behavior through involuntary associations of actions, thoughts, emotions, and consequences. Yet, the omission of introspection within our indoctrination can allow these associations to wield undue influence over future actions, leading to reluctance to express genuine thoughts to evade perceived negative outcomes. The orchestrated indoctrination system operates as a sophisticated conditioning mechanism, constructing an illusory perception of reality within individuals' minds. This fabricated reality becomes so deeply rooted that individuals make choices without deliberate contemplation. The conditioned responses become so ingrained that individuals conform to concepts of reality without conscious examination, analogous to Pavlov's dogs salivating at the sound of a bell. Contemplating whether Pavlov's experiment was a reflection of the prevailing mental bondage within indoctrinated consciousness gains significance when considering the potency of automatic emotional responses. Just as the dog's conditioned responses endured even in the absence of food, individuals persist in adhering to indoctrinated beliefs and established worldviews, despite potential inconsistencies or challenges. This persistence is evident in contradictions within religious beliefs, political affiliations, and notions of human equality. This resilience underscores the dominance of mental bondage, where conditioned emotional responses overshadow rational analysis, influencing behavior. In the context of physical enslavement, individuals are physically restrained, restricting their movement and forcing them into labor. In the realm of mental indoctrination, the desire for opulence becomes deeply ingrained. The pursuit of these indoctrinated desires becomes the driving force, incentivizing individuals to follow paths that lead to their satiation. This incentive to satisfy desires supersedes other considerations, leading to compromises in dignity and values, similar to the effect of shackles in physical enslavement. Understandably, the processes of acquiring basic needs align with inculcated doctrines. Our character is molded as we grow up, observing the ways people procure their necessities. The intricate machinery of well-orchestrated indoctrination and the subsequent mental bondage it instigates raise fundamental inquiries about the autonomy of human consciousness and the role of automatic responses. Pavlov's experiment, which highlighted the automatic nature of conditioned responses in animals, serves as a lens through which we can reflect on the automatic submission of human minds to indoctrinated worldviews, an embodiment of mental subjugation. The intricate connection between indoctrination, emotional conditioning, and voluntary submission underscores the complexity of human behavior and the potential for well-constructed ideologies to create choices, actions, and perceptions within our consciousness. Thus, exploring the possibility that Pavlov's experiment symbolizes prevailing mental bondage within societal consciousness offers a lens through which to examine the deeply rooted impact of indoctrination on human autonomy. A complex connection exists between desire, power, and control. When desires are shaped through conditioning, it can result in a notable power disparity, granting influence to those capable of fulfilling these engineered desires. By delving into the dynamic between desire, control, and indoctrinated worldview, we gain a clearer understanding of the mechanisms that sustain psychological captivity. The concept of manufactured desires becomes a central aspect of psychological bondage. These desires, ingrained through various means that stem from indoctrination, are often not genuine needs but rather artificially generated wants. This artificial nature of desires makes individuals susceptible to external influence. Those who offer a means of obtaining the objects of these desires effectively hold power over individuals' choices and actions. Just as Pavlov's dogs responded to the conditioned stimulus, individuals in psychological bondage respond to the stimulus of manufactured desires, creating a power dynamic between those who can fulfill the desires and those who seek to have them satisfied. Through emotional conditioning, desires are elevated to the status of needs, creating a complex tapestry of perceptions that shape human behavior and interactions. By dissecting the interplay between needs, wants, and the power dynamics they generate, we gain insight into the mechanisms that perpetuate psychological bondage. In the realm of psychological bondage, the relationship between work and basic needs takes center stage. While fundamental necessities like sustenance, shelter, and safety demand effort to acquire, societal rules carve the path individuals must tread to fulfill these requirements. Just as physical bondage dictates labor and movement, psychological bondage mandates adherence to orchestrated regulations to access essential provisions. This controlled avenue reinforces power dynamics, as individuals become reliant on these established routes to meet their fundamental needs. Upon recognizing the deep-rooted nature of indoctrination within, it becomes evident that an analytical approach alone holds little significance in achieving liberation from mental entanglement. As mentioned earlier, the path to emancipation from the clutches of mental enslavement encompasses introspection, meditation, and a profound connection with your higher self. To clarify the concept of your higher self, we must delve into the notion of our dual identity. One facet of your identity encompasses your physical body, emotions, and thoughts, while the other aspect serves as the observer, capable of witnessing your body, thoughts, and emotions. Consider this: when you think of something, you can discern that you are thinking. The same applies to your ability to recognize and experience specific emotions. Thus, you are two entities residing within one vessel: the entity that undergoes emotions, thoughts, and inhabits a body, and the observer, your higher self, which exists in a state of perpetual peace. Identifying with this observer within you is instrumental in disentangling yourself from the indoctrination that binds you. Therefore, our journey begins with introspection, a practice that enables us to identify instances where we automatically react to external stimuli, whether they be events, individuals, or material objects, in a detrimental manner. Introspection also proves valuable when thoughts or emotions disrupt your inner tranquility. As previously discussed, I elaborated on incorporating insights gained through introspection into your meditation practice. Another avenue to acquaint yourself with your higher self is by acknowledging your existence without relying on your intellectual faculties. Conditioning, as the primary tool of indoctrination, operates as a comprehensive force, exerting control over not only individual desires and basic needs but also behaviors and perceptions. By imposing a worldview, the belief that words have inherent qualities, and the denial of our higher self, indoctrination not only confines individuals to personal parameters of behavior but also arranges our surroundings to accommodate indoctrinated behavior. Just as physical bondage constrains an individual's movements, psychological bondage governs how individuals navigate their environment. Being that our volition are products of the very system we seek to transcend, an analytical approach to self-liberation is destined to fail. This realization underscores the complexity of breaking free from the fabricated reality that has shaped our perceptions from the outset. The pursuit of liberation from psychological bondage demands the ability to capture the instances where we respond automatically to situations, which can be accomplished through introspection. As we embark on this journey of introspection, it becomes evident that our perceptions of reality have been intricately woven by external forces. Our understanding of reality, as we perceive it, is but a construct molded by influences beyond our immediate awareness. The intricate labyrinth of indoctrination has set the parameters within which we question, think, and interpret the world around us. To unravel this labyrinth requires not only dedication but also a willingness to challenge the very foundation upon which our behaviors, both individual and communal, are constructed. In previous lectures, I have illuminated the fragile nature of the reality we perceive. We have touched upon the intricate process by which this reality is fabricated, dissecting its origins and the motives behind its creation. These revelations prompt us to peer beyond the veil and recognize the profound impact of the constructed reality within the fabric of our existence. By delving into the forces that have woven this intricate tapestry, we begin to grasp the mechanisms that sustain psychological bondage. With this, I conclude today's lesson. Thank you for your time, fearless individuals. Congratulations for persevering up to this point. This is just the beginning of the profundities that await, many of which will take unexpected directions. Comprehensive explanation of key terms related to Pavlov's classical conditioning. Key term: conditioned. Definition: when something is conditioned, it means that it has been trained or changed through a learning process. Example: after months of conditioning, the athlete's body became stronger and more resilient to physical stress. Key term: conditioned. Definition: this term refers to a stimulus or response that has been modified or influenced through learning and association with another stimulus. Example: in Pavlov's famous experiment, the dog's salivation response to the sound of a bell, which was initially neutral, becoming associated with food, is an example of a conditioned response. Key term: stimulus. Definition: a stimulus is something that causes a response in an organism. It can be any event or object that elicits a reaction. Example: when someone shines a bright light in your eyes, your pupils constrict, response, and the light is the stimulus that causes this reaction. Key term: conditioned stimulus. Definition: a conditioned stimulus is an initially neutral stimulus that, through repeated associations with an unconditioned stimulus, becomes able to trigger a conditioned response. Example: think of a bell, conditioned stimulus, that, when repeatedly rung before mealtime, makes your mouth water, conditioned response, even if there's no food present. Key term: unconditioned stimulus. Definition: an unconditioned stimulus is something that naturally and automatically triggers a response in an organism, without prior conditioning. Example: if you touch a hot stove, unconditioned stimulus, your hand jerks back, response, immediately because the heat from the stove is an innate trigger for this reaction. Key term: neutral stimulus. Definition: initially devoid of any specific reaction or response, this stimulus transforms into a conditioned stimulus after consistent pairings with an unconditioned stimulus. Over time, it gains the capacity to evoke a conditioned response. It's like a regular thing that doesn't make anyone react in any special way initially. However, if you consistently connect it with something exciting or important, it can become something that makes people or animals react. Let's break it all down by revisiting each term, repeating its definition, and providing more detailed examples to help us understand better. Conditioned stimulus. Definition: this term denotes a previously neutral stimulus that, after repeated pairings with an unconditioned stimulus, comes to evoke a conditioned response. It's noteworthy that the conditioned stimulus alone can incite a response akin to the unconditioned stimulus. Let's break down what a conditioned stimulus means in simple terms. Imagine you have a bell, just a regular bell with no special meaning. Now, if you ring that bell every time before you have your favorite meal, your brain starts to associate the sound of the bell with yummy food. After a while, when you hear that bell ring, even if there's no food around, your mouth might start watering because your brain now thinks food is coming. So, in short, a conditioned stimulus is something that used to be neutral, like the bell, but becomes a trigger for a response, like your mouth watering, because it's been paired with something else, in this case, the meal. It's like your brain learns to expect something based on a signal it didn't care about before. Remember, the conditioned stimulus becomes special because it's connected to something else that naturally makes you react, like how touching a hot stove makes you pull your hand back without thinking. Conditioned response. Definition: the learned response that materializes due to the presence of the conditioned stimulus. This response emerges after the conditioned stimulus has been associated with the unconditioned stimulus. Let's break this down in simpler terms. When we talk about a conditioned response, we're talking about a reaction or behavior that you've learned because of something you've experienced before. Imagine you have a pet dog, and every time you give your dog a treat, let's call it a yummy bone, they get super excited and start wagging their tail. Now, this wagging tail is their conditioned response. Why? Because they've learned to do it when they see the treat, the conditioned stimulus. So, the conditioned response is like a behavior that happens because of something they've learned. In this case, they learn to associate seeing the treat, the conditioned stimulus, with the excitement and tail wagging because you've given them treats before. It's like a natural reaction they now have because of their past experiences. Unconditioned stimulus. Definition: a stimulus that naturally triggers an unconditioned response without prior learning. It's an inherent stimulus evoking an involuntary, reflexive response. Let's make this easier to understand. Think about when you touch something really hot by accident, like a hot stove. Your immediate reaction, like pulling your hand away, is what we call a reflexive response. It's quick, automatic, and you do it without even thinking. Now, the hot stove in this case is the unconditioned stimulus. Why? Because it's something that naturally and immediately causes you to react, like pulling your hand away to avoid getting burned. You didn't have to learn to do this, it's just something your body does automatically to protect you from harm. So, an unconditioned stimulus is like something that makes you react instantly without any training or learning. Unconditioned response. Definition: the unlearned response that unfolds naturally and instinctively in reaction to the unconditioned stimulus. This response remains uninfluenced by prior learning. Let's talk about your body's natural reactions. Imagine you accidentally touch something really hot, like a boiling pot on the stove. Your immediate response, like pulling your hand away and saying, "ouch," is what we call an unconditioned response. Now, why do we call it unconditioned? Well, it's because this reaction happens without you having to learn it. It's built into you, kind of like a natural instinct. Your body just knows to respond this way when it encounters something hot. So, an unconditioned response is like a quick and automatic reaction that your body does all on its own, without any need for learning or training. Neutral stimulus. Definition: initially devoid of any specific reaction or response, this stimulus transforms into a conditioned stimulus after consistent pairings with an unconditioned stimulus. Over time, it gains the capacity to evoke a conditioned response. It's like a regular thing that doesn't make anyone react in any special way initially. However, if you consistently connect it with something exciting or important, it can become something that makes people or animals react. Explanation: let's simplify this idea. Imagine you have a new pet, a cute little puppy named Max. When Max sees a regular object, like a bell, he doesn't really care about it. The bell doesn't make him excited or anything. We call this bell a neutral stimulus, because it doesn't do anything special for him at first. Now, let's say every time you give Max his favorite treat, let's say it's a delicious bone, you also ring that bell. You do this over and over again, every time you give him the treat. After a while, something interesting happens. Max starts getting excited and wagging his tail just when he hears the bell, even if you didn't give him the treat. That's because the bell, which used to be neutral, has become special to Max. It's like a signal to him that yummy bone time is coming. We now call it a conditioned stimulus, because it makes him respond in a certain way. So, a neutral stimulus is just something that doesn't mean much at first, but with some training, like pairing it with Max's favorite treat, it can become something that makes him react, and that's what we call a conditioned stimulus. It's like turning a regular thing into something exciting for your pet.